I'm Amy Baxter, editor of Retail Leader, and welcome to Trend Talk. Every week on Trend Talk, we identify a retail trend and give it a deep dive with an industry insider. This week, we're diving into the COVID-19 pandemic and addressing how retailers have fared, from how they've taken care of their employees to how they've weathered these turbulent times. My guest is Deb Gabor, CEO of Soul Marketing and author of Irrational Loyalty. So welcome, Deb. Thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
Your book is called Irrational Loyalty, but what is irrational loyalty?
Irrational loyalty is the condition where people are so indelibly bonded to brands that they would feel like they were cheating on it if they were to choose an alternative. So it's a little bit how I feel about my iPhone. A couple of weeks ago, I was out of town. I dropped my iPhone in the subway and I cracked the screen and I had to take it to a repair place, and I was out of commission for a couple of days, and they offered me an Android phone to use as a replacement for a couple of days while they ordered some replacements for the broken parts. And I felt absolutely twitchy holding it in my hand. There's really nothing rational about that. It's really, this condition is when a brand is so indispensable to a person that it becomes part of their very identity. It says something about them, not just to other people, but to themselves, about who they are through the products and services that they use, the retailers that they shop at, the handbags that they carry, the cars that they drive, things like that. So irrational loyalty is a condition that every brand should strive for, because it allows you to charge a premium for your product, even when your product's functional benefits may be substandard. It enables you to create this sort of this condition of indelible loyalty that gets people to buy from you again and again and again and advocate for the brand. And it's the thing that helps you weather the most turbulent times.
Yeah, cool. So I know the trend we're talking about is a little bit about how retailers have taken care during COVID, but now that you mentioned this brand irrationality, I want to ask you a little bit about the supply chain struggles that are ongoing right now and all over the headlines, because there are things that are out of stock, hard to come by right now just because of supply chain challenges. And is that affecting irrational loyalty at all? Like maybe consumers are having to go to their second choice for items or carry an Android instead of an iPhone?
Yeah, definitely. I can't see that it's not impacting, this condition of irrational loyalty. And it's a little bit like the early days of the pandemic, when in many cases we couldn't shop at our favorite retailers. We couldn't go to our favorite restaurants. There were places, unless they were deemed essential, that we just weren't going to. And the smart and savvy retailers that were able to create that condition of irrational loyalty and sustain those relationships with their customers who had them as favorite retailers were the ones that figured out interesting ways to be able to serve their customers even when customers couldn't darken their doorsteps. So, everything from enabling curbside delivery, taking an entire product array and very, very quickly putting it online, allowing people to place phone orders, doing home delivery, interesting community partnerships and things like that. And so that's one of the practices, or that's like four practices that I saw that helped retailers really extend that irrational loyalty during a time when customers couldn't fully use the brand. During a time when supply chain issues are going to be a problem, retailers are going to need to be creative and thoughtful and strategic and deliberate in terms of how are we going to maintain relationships with our customers even when the products that they want to buy from us are not in stock. How can they serve their customers with let's say, useful content to help them enhance the use of the products that they already have? Or how can they create new kinds of gift giving scenarios leading up to the pandemic? How can they partner together with other retailers in other locations potentially, to create partnerships to be able to get the goods and services to the customers that they most want to get? So it's going to take a lot of creativity. And like we saw during the early days of the pandemic, there are some retailers that just went to extraordinary lengths to be able to serve customers, even when they couldn't serve customers in their store. And we had supply chain issues at the beginning of the pandemic as well. So this is nothing new. But I think that they need to have in mind that they have to keep their customers at the center of the brand and really maintain this idea that their job is not necessarily entirely to sell products, but to be of service to the consumer, and really look at how can we create success for the consumer, even if it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to sell them this product today.
Yeah. I'm curious too how, retailers have not just taken care of the consumer or, altered their practices just to make sure that consumers have what they want when they want it in an easy fashion and keep business rolling. But could you give me an overview of how retailers have reacted to the pandemic and these struggles in terms of how workers have been treated too?
In most cases, workers have been treated pretty well. I know that's like a sweeping generalization, and I'm sure that there are workers out there that, isolated cases that they haven't been treated really well. But one of the things that I've seen is that the retailers that have put their associates, their employees first in terms of how they're thinking about how they're going to weather this ongoing storm are the ones that have fared the best, the ones that have put employee safety and health and their needs and their mental health. They've put those things first. And when they've done it in a truly authentic and sincere way, those retailers have fared really well because as consumers, we want to patronize retailers that treat their employees like their family or, that they're dear to them. And none of us want to walk into a store where we feel unsafe, and where that absolutely starts is with associates. Like, your associates are your brand. If you are a retailer, your entire experience is really tied up in the relationship that associates have with consumers, even if it's on a purely transactional basis. So when consumers who feel strongly that employees should be treated well, when those consumers come in a store and they see employees being treated well, then they're going to have a stronger bond with that retail brand because they see, hey, they're taking care of their employees. Thusly, they can take care of us as well. It's kind of like Chick-fil-A has a theory: cared for people, care for people. As a brand, I mean, they're, I guess they're sort of a retailer. They're in the fast casual food space, but as a brand, they spend very little on actual advertising. And what other similar companies invest in advertising and marketing, Chick-fil-A invests similar amounts in improving and enhancing the employee experience. Well, the same is true of a lot of retailers, just making sure that their employees are treated in a way that helps those employees develop irrational loyalty towards their employers. Like, as consumers, we want to shop at places where employees are happy to work and they feel like they're cared for and they feel like their safety and their health is paramount, and that these retailers are emphasizing people and profits at the same time, that they really have, and they do it all.
As we're talking about this, there's this other sort of elephant in the room, though, which is the jobs report from August. There was a record 4.3 million workers who resigned from their jobs during the month. And, most of them went to other jobs. But what does that say about the environment that retailers are facing?
It's not just retailers, but every business is facing this, what they're calling it, like the Great Resignation. I know, as the CEO of a company, we have several open positions that are just really, really difficult to fill. And no matter how hard I work as an employer to, create an environment where employees feel like they have the ability to fulfill their whole human, their full human potential. There are other organizations right down the street that are offering something better, different, more money, better benefits, better working hours, better working conditions. We are in this situation where there's not only a mismatch between the workforce that's available and the jobs that are available, but those who really, really want to work, they kind of have a choice of wherever they want to work. And I think retailers as employers have to work harder on their employer brand, that they have to really, really put a stake in the ground to show this is what we stand for. This is who we are. These are the kinds of people that we attract. Here's how we help those people through their work achieve their fullest potential. Work takes up a huge part of the day. And for the most part, human beings are not going to work with the idea that they just want to punch a card. They just want to punch in, punch out. They really do want to make contributions. And it's becoming increasingly competitive for retailers to get really great employees. So I think that retailers have to work as hard or even harder on their employer brand than they do on their consumer-facing brand today in order to ensure they get the best associates who are the best ambassadors and advocates and representatives of the brand who can serve consumers in a way that's in accordance with that organization's values and beliefs.
So there's a recent example that I think is really interesting. I want to ask you about Nike. In August, they also announced a week off for their headquarters, their head office employees to take a week off to de-stress. So can you tell me about this initiative and why it's newsworthy, if it is, an unusual initiative to take?
Definitely an unusual initiative to take. Very divisive in terms of how people reacted to that. Like if you go back and thinking about August when this happened, you look at social media, it was probably as much for as it was against. And yes, on the surface, it looks like a great gesture. Yes, let's give all of our employees in the headquarters location several days off so that they can rest up and recuperate and recover from what's been a really, really difficult 18 or so months going through the pandemic. At the same time, the same benefit was not extended to employees in their retail locations. And that's a mismatch.
Seems like a
right?
Yes.
And that's a big mismatch. And people who went beyond the surface, and I watched this whole thing unfold, right? There were a lot of people who were applauding. They're like, oh, this is great. This is really an organization putting its employees first. Yeah, putting its headquarters employees first, not necessarily the front line, the people who are face to face with customers every day. And frankly, the unfortunate recipients of all crap rolling downhill every time something is not in stock or a customer is asked to put on their mask when they walk into a store, or, there's some kind of pricing discrepancy on the floor, or, some kind of dissatisfied customer interaction. It fell flat for me in terms of being fully encompassing of what I think Nike wanted to do as a statement. And therefore, in many cases, a lot of people felt like it really, really looked like window dressing. It, almost like just a hollow publicity stunt, because it didn't go deep enough. If, my criticism of that is Nike, if you really cared, you would have figured out a way to compensate either with time or with additional money or some bonuses or benefits or something like that for your frontline employees. Because believe me, I work in a headquarters location of a company. I'm not dealing frontline face-to-face with consumers all day, every day, especially in the midst and the height of a pandemic, pre and post vaccine availability and all that kind of stuff. And it was hard for me, sure, right? It is, I'm not the money-making engine for my company. The headquarters people at Nike are not the money-making engine for the brand. The people who are out there being advocates and recommenders of the brand to people who come to the brand are the people who probably are feeling this the most and were recognized the least as a result of this one particular gesture.